Hey guys, this is Joseph Lucero with Powerlifting Technique, and today we're going to talk about bands versus chains, which is better for the common day powerlifter, and which one's going to make you stronger. Bands and chains have a huge part in the powerlifting community. You see it all the time. You see people lifting these barbells and pulling against bands and pulling against chains, and a lot of times people will say, oh, they're the same thing. They provide the same stimulus. They make the weight harder as you get to lockout to challenge your range of motion and to make you a better powerlifter. And although that is true, on paper, they both add additional strength. There is a huge difference. There's actually multiple differences on bands and chains, and to figure out which is better for your powerlifting success. By the end of the video, you'll know all the pros, the cons, the similarities, the differences, and then we'll let you know what our pick is on which is better for you to become a better powerlifter. Is it going to be chains or is it going to be bands? I'm going to start off with bands. It's something I'm a little bit more familiar with growing up. And the whole idea behind bands is that it is an elastic stimulus. So the longer you stretch the band, the more tension is provided. It's going to make that barbell a lot heavier as you increase the range of motion of the movement. So when you get to lockout on bench press, when you get to lockout on squat and deadlift, the more that band gets tense, the more the strength is on that barbell, and it makes it really hard to finish the movement. So people will use bands, well, chains too, in a couple ways. They'll use it for their heavy sets or their sub-maximal sets. So if it's a lighter weight, it just teaches them how to be forceful from start to finish. Because if I know the bar is going to get heavier, I'm going to have to accommodate more and be more forceful with my movement so that I'm getting better at my lockout, my rate of force development, and I'm being more explosive and powerful from start to finish. Now, as I told you, the band with the barbell on squat, bench, and deadlift, it makes it hard at lockout because of the amount of tension that's built with the band. And a great thing about bands is they come in all different shapes and sizes. So you can have bands that are really thin, really thick, which adds more or maybe not as much near the end of each repetition so that you can get a certain amount of weight out of each band for each rep. So there's some bands that only add 20 pounds of resistance, 80, 120, 200. The thicker they are, the more resistance it adds. And actually what you can do with the bands too is you can hang them so that it makes the weight lighter and you can overload your lifts more because of that setup. So what I mean by that is the squat bar up here, I could tie bands to the top of the squat rack and I can hang the band and hook it on so that when I do squat down, the bar gets really light. And then when I get to the top, it gets really heavy, close to the raw weight that's being loaded onto the bar. And sometimes people like using that reverse band stimulus to help with the overloading mechanics of peaking for top level strength. But nonetheless, the bands are going to help you increase and then decrease the amount of tension on the bar to help assist you and give you a different kind of stimulus that you don't get with just true raw weight. So, if you're a beginner powerlifter, you might not want to use bands or chains, but when you're beginning, having 150 pounds, 200 pounds in your hands from start to finish might make more sense than tying bands, making the movement a little chaotic, and then trying to not only enhance your strength, but also enhance your coordination. So sometimes bands and chains might not be for beginners, but more so intermediate and advanced lifters. Now, I did talk about how the band does a lot of great things, but let's talk about the cons. One of the hardest cons of it is setting it up. So like my rack right here, I have places to tie the bands around, but I don't pegs or hooks, which can help the band stretch out more to make it more tense. So sometimes my band setup might be a little loose. So one of the downfalls to bands is how do you set it up? And then another downfall is the bands sometimes force you into a range of motion that might not be natural to your movement. So if I'm doing a squat, the band makes me want to keep all the weight in the middle. So if I naturally lean forward on my squat or lean back in my squat, the band's forcing me to stay in the middle of the movement, which could be a good thing, but sometimes it's a bad thing too. So that's where chains come in. Chains is the same kind of overall arching theme of adds more resistance to the top of your lifts to challenge your lockout and that positioning. But the thing about the chains and bands is the chains provide a progressive linear amount of weight on the bar versus the bands. So the bands provide exponential strength. As the range of motion increases, it might go 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 50 pounds, 90 pounds. I'm just making up numbers, but as the band gets more tense, it's adding higher and higher increments of strength to the bar versus chains, where as the chains come down to the floor, you're losing each lock a chain progressively as you get to lockout. So you might have a 100-pound chain, and then when it gets down to the floor, all 100 pounds are gone. But with a band, you haven't lost all that weight. There's still tension on the bar, so it makes it hard to mathematically calculate. So as you drop the chains to the floor, you're losing bits of weight versus the bands where you could be losing a lot of weight depending on the tension of the band and how much it's affecting the barbell in that situation. So chains provide more of a linear change in tension versus bands providing an exponential change. So that curve just makes it a little bit more different to understand and to withstand. Another benefit of the chain, besides it having a linear progressive amount of weight on the bar, is it allows you to move the bar in your natural movement pattern. So like if you squat, you come down and then the bar just dips a little bit in front of you, even if it's not desirable or advantageous, the chains will allow you to move in that range. So it's more accommodating in that sense too. But one of the downfalls to that is that some people say when they lift with chains and they unrack the squat or they unrack the bench, because the chains are hanging off, it might sway and cause a little bit of instability. So a lot of times when you do these chained lifts, you probably want to have part of the chain touching the floor so it doesn't sway and cause an unnatural effect to your movement. So again, when it comes to chains and bands, the whole point is to add resistance to the top near the lockout of your lift to challenge you to be more forceful and stronger in those sticking points and parts of the lift that get tougher. So when it comes to bands, when it comes to chains, you got to make a decision, which is going to be best for you. And here at Powerlifting Technique, we've had these conversations about which is going to be better, which one makes more sense. So one of the other benefits of bands is they're insanely cheap. When you go buy chains, they're expensive. I don't have price points off the top of my head, but I know they're expensive because I looked into it for myself, and they're hard to find. And even if you find chains to get shipped, the amount of payment that would cost to ship over that much weight is instrumental. And when it comes to bands, I mean, look at this. I'm folding it so many times. I mean, I couldn't fit it in my pocket, but I could put this in my backpack, carry it with me, and use that to make my barbell lifts a ton harder than they were before. So when it comes to the argument of bands and chains, yes, I understand that bands provide an exponential amount of resistance to the bar, which can make it aggressively heavy at certain points. But if I can set it up correctly and I have a good, routine with implementing them, the bands make it such more convenient to use in my training plan. They're easier to travel with. You can even put them in your backpack to fly. They're easy to take to the gym. There's no bulkiness to them. There's no inconvenience on them getting in the way. They're pretty easy to integrate in your training, even if you don't have hooks or pegs on your bar or things like that. And one of the other great benefits too is the affordability. I think I bought a pair of purples on Amazon. They're an off brand. I didn't have to buy a big name brand, and it provided the same stimulus that I would have gotten from a different pair of bands too. So when I think it comes to bands versus chains, the affordability, the flexibility they have, and how convenient they are, the convenience factor makes it so much more better to invest in bands versus chains for your powerlifting success. So if you agree or disagree, leave a comment, like the channel, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Maybe you can ask a question about these bands or chains in the video, and then we can make another video about it. Like maybe how do I create a program that integrates bands or chains to be successful in powerlifting? That'd be a great video too. And if you want to learn more about that, leave a comment below. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions, to address these questions. But for now, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you liked it. Go ahead, like I said, subscribe, like the channel, like the video, share it with a friend, and hopefully we'll catch you in the next video about more powerlifting tips and ways to be successful in your career.